Minigames have ingrained themselves into the hearts and minds of Final Fantasy fans for decades now, and Final Fantasy VII stands as one of the primary reasons for this. While earlier games in the franchise did have the occasional minigame, they weren't anywhere near as commonplace. But when Final Fantasy VII came onto the scene, it featured them heavily throughout, as they appeared as part of the mainline story, such as the Parade March in Junon, and as fun asides. From this point forward, minigames often added a layer of life to already complex feats of storytelling. It's one thing to invent a fictional sport for a story, it's another thing to make concrete rules for it and then have players experience it firsthand. Minigames like Blitzball or Triple Triad made these worlds feel all the more real and lived in, as we can imagine what people in these worlds did for fun in their day-to-day lives. But there were also some downsides too. Much like some real-life carnival games can be made to favour the house, some Final Fantasy minigames were, for lack of better words, rage-inducingly difficult. Now, we've previously explored some of these minigames in an older video, so do give that a watch if you don't hear your favourite or least favourite minigame mentioned here. But with our usual caveat of only featuring one entry per game, let's ease into this list of 7 incredibly hard minigames we struggled to overcome, and we're going to start with perhaps the least frustrating entry, depending on your perspective. Over the years, fishing minigames have become very popular, and that doesn't just relate to Final Fantasy. These range from being fairly relaxed, like in Animal Crossing, to being a bit more involved, like in Stardew Valley. The fishing game featured in Final Fantasy XV was a little more complicated as far as difficulty goes though, but it was still very much adored by fans, and the developers loved it too, so much so that it received its own VR spin-off game called Monster of the Deep. Like most of the minigames featured on this list, fishing was completely optional as far as progressing through the main storyline went, though some side quests did require it. And for those who strove for completion, the desire to complete the fishing record was a tempting one. But the controls could be a little finicky, and many players struggled to catch even one fish, let alone completing the fishing record. To start with, the appropriate lure needed to be used to catch a specific fish. If the wrong lure was used, fish would simply ignore it. After, there was a little finesse involved with getting a fish's attention long enough for them to bite. From there, it was a delicate game of reeling in the fish and pulling in the right direction without creating too much tension. While most of the fish were relatively easy to catch, those who were up to the challenge have often found themselves at the mercy of the pink jade gar, the hardest fish to catch in the game. The feeling of getting so close to catching it, only for it to then get away at the last second, can leave even the most patient of gamers reeling. And it's probably why, when looking at trophy completion, fewer people have unlocked fishing-related trophies than any of the other bro-related skill trophies in the game. Final Fantasy VII represented a huge generational shift for the franchise, and as such, the developers were keen to test the limits of what this new era of gaming could accomplish. This saw them, amongst other things, create countless minigames, and many of them resided in one of the game's most memorable locations, the Gold Saucer. Designed as an in-world renowned tourist destination, the Gold Saucer was filled with garish lights, loud sounds, and lots of squares, each with its own hidden delights. In this regard, the Wonder Square was a treasure trove, as it housed a considerable number of the game's most notorious minigames. This included the 3D Battler, which has become a source of ire for gamers over the years. For this video, however, we're going to focus on one of the more bizarre minigames, Moghouse. Moghouse was akin to a life simulator that followed a young Moogle named Mog who was on a quest to find a mate. In retrospect, it's not a difficult minigame to beat. The player, when prompted, just needed to feed Mog 5 nuts and wait for him to learn how to fly. The next day, when a female Moogle entered the scene, the player needed to then feed Mog another 3 nuts so he could impress her with his newfound flying skills. What made this confusing though, was that when the game originally released, there were nowhere near as many resources available to the public. The player therefore needed to rely on the visual cues of Mog rubbing his belly to indicate that he was still hungry, and this served as a cue to keep feeding him nuts. And you also needed to understand that the squeak for happiness indicated that Mog was full. Then you needed to wait until he moved on his own to begin attempting to fly. It was all too easy and tempting back then to continue feeding him, not knowing that his hunger was satiated, and inadvertently sabotaging any attempt for him to take flight. While it seemed straightforward enough with that knowledge in hand, it was anything but at the time. And even now, it has continued to perplex those who find themselves playing the original game without a guide. While Final Fantasy X didn't have a Gold Saucer equivalent, it was still flush with minigames, and many of them have become iconic in their own right. Blitzball, while derided by some, is heralded by others as one of the best minigames the franchise has to offer, as on top of its detailed gameplay, it added so much depth to the world of Spyro. Then there's the infamous Lightning Bolt minigame in the Thunder Plains and the Chocobo Catcher, both of which we've spoken about many times before in various contexts. Now, each of the three aforementioned minigames also had a close relationship with unlocking the power of a specific celestial weapon. Blitzball was associated with Waka, Lulu was the Lightning Bolts, and Tidus was the Chocobo Catcher. For Kimahri, however, players had to undergo a butterfly hunt in the Macalania Woods. While a butterfly hunt sounds like it should be relaxing, the version that appeared in Final Fantasy X was anything but. The player had to follow a path and catch blue butterflies while avoiding red ones. This was simple enough until the winding path and camera angles interfered with the depth perception. This meant Tidus was often running towards the camera while still needing to dodge red butterflies. Luckily, players could pause the game and use that as a means of spotting the location of the next butterfly, while also making avoiding the red ones much easier. Final Fantasy VII Remake promised fans of the original game an opportunity to relive the experience of unfolding the story and falling back in love with the characters all over again, all with the benefit of modern graphics and gameplay. The pressure on the development team to ensure they did the original justice was therefore immense, and no shortage of care and consideration went into the game's creation. That notion was, of course, also related to minigames. Numerous were featured throughout, including playing darts in Seventh Heaven and the motorcycle chase sequences. But too many games were tougher than the rest. In the more skeevy parts of Midgar's Undercity resided the Wall Market. It was home to establishments such as the Honeybee Inn, a members-only nightclub that featured a dance minigame, which was difficult for some, but not the focus of this entry. The gym in the Wall Market then featured two more minigames, a squatting competition and a pull-up competition played by Cloud and Tifa respectively. The gameplay was the same for both minigames, players just needed to follow a pattern using the various face buttons. After a while, that pattern then disappeared though, forcing players to both memorize it and the tempo to ensure Cloud and Tifa's movements continued. The challenge was that as the characters got into the groove, the tempo changed. But they could also both get fatigued, requiring players to mash a button to get them back on track. While both minigames were difficult, much like in real life, more people tended to struggle with the pull-up challenge over the squat challenge due to the in-game pattern being a little bit more complex. And while both minigames were mandatory, they could be won with relative ease as part of the mainline story. The real workout was then for those who wanted to challenge themselves against Jules, as he did not come to play. By the time Final Fantasy IX was in development, trading card games had started to become big business. Magic the Gathering was in full swing, and such was its success that it even served as a point of inspiration for the creation of Triple Triad in Final Fantasy VIII. Things have, of course, now gone full circle in that regard, as Magic the Gathering has collaborated with Final Fantasy on a gorgeous and expansive set. But after the success of Triple Triad, the developers working on Final Fantasy IX wanted to create something of a spiritual successor. Thus, did they create Tetramaster. The general rules for the game involved placing cards, each with their own stats, on a 4x4 grid. This sounds simple, but the issue most players had with Tetramaster, and why it's often considered one of the hardest minigames in the franchise, was the amount of randomness. All too often, a player could do everything strategically right, but still lose due to random number generation not being in their favour. The other factor related to rewards. Tetramaster wasn't linked to some tough objective or long-winded side quest. Instead, it was all about personal goals for collecting every card and getting better versions, and also just winning a total number of matches. And these objectives weren't straightforward. It meant that while there was a certain appeal to the game, without additional rewards, there was less incentive to keep playing, especially when so many felt they couldn't out-strategy a game that required so much luck. If you did though, then wanting to collect every single card was a tall order. When developing Final Fantasy VII Rebirth, The team opted to build upon what was established in the original game and then in Remake. And one of these surprising additions was a fully fleshed out version of the mildly entertaining piano minigame that in the original game was linked to obtaining Tifa's ultimate limit break. In Rebirth, pianos could be found throughout the world, and with each new discovery came new sheet music that could be learned and then performed. 2 circular indicators appeared on screen to denote the left and right hand. Within these circles were wedges that indicated which notes to play by highlighting them in blue, with a gold bar then drifting out towards the edge to denote timing. It meant playing the piano was a novel take on traditional rhythm games, but it could also be quite hard due to how much concentration was required. And this challenge only grew as more pieces of music were found, as the volume and frequency of notes increased, as well as the tempo and duration of the tracks themselves. Achieving the A rank therefore required both practice and skill, and it was certainly not a minigame that suited everyone's talents. That then brings us onto the final entry in our list, Sphere Break. Final Fantasy X-2 launched 2 years after the original game, and like any good sequel, it expanded on the original through character growth, world building, and of course the introduction of brutal minigames. Blitzball made a return as a management-style simulation game, and the lightning dodging was replaced by the much reviled tower recalibration game. But neither of these compare to Sphere Break, a maths-based strategic puzzle game. And while it may have been a bit more forgiving than the tower recalibration game, it has become notorious for its complexity. The goal of the game was to reach a target number by selecting and combining numbered coins on a grid. In the centre of this grid was a blue core sphere. Surrounding it were 4 gold entry coins, which were brought in by the player, and surrounding those were 12 border coins, which were randomly selected for each game. Each coin had a number ranging from 1 to 9, and the goal was to combine these so that the sums matched multiples of the number in the core sphere. For example, if the number in the core sphere was 3, then the sum of any selected coins had to be 3, 6, or 9, and so on. To make matters more complicated, a certain number of border coins needed to be used within a set number of rounds, and should the player fail to use the appropriate number of coins per round, they would fail the game. And of course, it was also on a timer, in case doing a series of maths problems wasn't stress-inducing enough. That then made everything quite hectic, and beating some of the game's harder foes was no joke. With that though, they were 7 mini-games that often proved a pretty difficult challenge to overcome. Please share in the comments below which of these you found particularly grating, and if you enjoyed this video, feel free to hit that like button and subscribe for more. Alright everyone, with that, this is Daryl signing out. As always, I'd like to give a big thank you to all of our Patreon and YouTube membership supporters, especially Benjamin Snow, Chris M. Walker, Christopher Gardner, Clever Chavez, EXP Required on YouTube, Gregory and Stephen, who are super special Onion Knight supporters, and of course, a big thank you to everyone for watching this video. I'll see you all again soon for more Final Fantasy goodness.